turns out that so much of what we thought was intelligence is really artificial intelligence.
Wow.
Mimicry. Easy thing to go through yeshiva and just learn to mimic.
Right.
And you can become a mishpia in Lubavitch. Just so at which point do you stop mimicking and start actually thinking? And I have to think. As soon as you're able to say, I don't understand this. This doesn't make sense to me. I don't have an answer to this. So then that's evidence that you're really thinking.
Welcome to Homesick for Lubavitch, a podcast where we explore Lubavitch identity in the year 2025. My name is Bosi Lgani, and I will be your host. Let's begin. Alrighty, we are here with Rabbi Tzvi Freeman in Sandy Springs, Georgia.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You got the right place. Yeah.
I did. Thank you very much for agreeing to do this.
Fantastic.
A pleasure meeting you. It seems like for the second time at least.
At least, yeah.
All right. It turns out that you're certainly more memorable than I am. Because I remember something you said, and you don't remember a thing that I said. Truth is, I probably did not say anything interesting. That's the truth. That's probably...
That's no riot. Yeah. No riot.
Okay. Fair. But I think that's probably what happened. So anyway, we were talking of the thing that I did remember you telling me, and this is quite a few years ago, was that when you were, I think, at Morristown, that you were at that point very interested in, you said Taoism or?
Before I came. Okay.
Right, before you came.
Well, what I was talking about is what influences my way of writing.
Right.
And so before meeting up with Chassidus, there were many things that fascinated me. But as far as literature goes, there was a recent translation of Lao Tzu, the Tao Ching, and so on. And the way it was translated was using the language of the New England transcendentalists. You know who those are, like who New England transcendentalists. Names are flying away from me right now. But in the 19th century, there were certain authors, Walt Whitman, there was the psychologist William James. There was, anyways, they were found ways of writing spirituality, and they had a very distinct style.
Okay.
So somebody translated Lao Tzu, which is Taoism, basically, which are these little, sort of like haiku, but when we're talking about Southeast Asia, not Japan, and translated using that type of language. So it's very cryptic. You can't really understand what's going on over here. You're supposed to try to figure it out. But the language was a kind of English that sort of supported that. And I was it really sung with me. So the way that I ended up writing the books that I'm best known for is the Bring Heaven Down to Earth and what goes now out as the Daily Dose.
Right.
Is in that style. I figure I'll do Chassidus. Chassidus just came out naturally in that way. But that I was just talking about the influence from a literary standpoint. That's all.
Right. Yeah, and it goes without saying that it's not like you can, even if you wanted to, you can't just transfer what they were saying into Chassidus without learning Chassidus and going on a whole journey. You have to ingest the Chassidus before you can even put it out in that style, even if you're copy and pasting the style, right? It's not like you can just, you can't superimpose it on top of Chassidus without a understanding of Chassidus.
Yeah. So what a lot of authors are doing I think we've only recently discovered what is it that we were doing all along. We have these LLMs, these large language models.
Right.
So that turns out that's what most of the time we were doing, most of the time with Chassidus.
Right.
We were just mimicking, like these machines do. We were just mimicking. But to really transport it from one world to another, you have to, like you're saying, you have to go dive into the well and go deep, deep down into the bottom, and then you come up with some real water. And then you find the packaging for it. You'll find the right packaging for it. But most of the stuff is just, we translate this like this, we translate that, and you don't get anything. You're getting the surface, the very surface that way.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll come back to your story in a bit, but I think we already jumped in the deep end, so let's swim in it a little bit.
I like deep ends. Yeah.
You like deep ends?
So we'll go swimming, go straight for the deep end, yeah.
God bless you. Man after my own heart. So certainly when it comes to conversations, like,
play around, but get your feet wet where you can get your head wet.
You're gonna be cold anyway. You may as well have fun. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, we're not talking about the deep end of a mikveh. We're talking about the deep end of a pool.
It's just deep ends. Deep ends in general.
Yeah. Probably best not to cannonball into the mikveh, but
it's been done, especially to Ferris guys in Morristown.
I am sure.
We threw them in when I was there.
I'm sure. That's funny. Yeah. Cannonballing in the mikveh. That could be like a band or something.
Yeah. With your rubber ducky.
With your rubber ducky. No, but it's something that has come up on a recurring basis. Is how do we translate bittul into English? I've seen people discuss it online. I think it's come up on the podcast a bunch of times.
Self-transcendence.
Okay. Well, one second. Usually it's self-nullification.
Nah.
Yeah, and it's like, what is it? No, but even if you don't agree with it, it's like, what does that even mean?
Abnegation. They use abnegation.
Abnegation. It's like,
what's the other one? Effulgence, permeate. There's a couple of them. The words that you'll only hear from your Kabad rabbi.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Self-nullification. And first of all, I don't know what those words even mean. And what strikes me is not so much like a game of what is the word. What I feel is even in Hebrew, the word bittul doesn't mean anything. The word bittul means, it could mean bittul b'shishim, like a physical kind, an irrelevance that comes by quantity. It could mean all kinds of things. The reason that people have this idea of bittul in their mind is because they've learned a lot of Chassidus, and the idea of bittul, the word of bittul, is associated with these large ideas and these complex ideas. So when you say bittul, it connects to all of that, right? It associates with those ideas. And then we try to transfer it to English without the context. And then the one person says this and one person says that. I do remember, although I haven't read it for years, I'll be honest with you, your preface to Bring Heaven Down into Earth.
Yeah,
which was for a long time, maybe still is, my father's favorite book. He was telling everyone about it when it came out. I remember you open up a beautiful idea of the window of the tzaddik.
That's the second book. That's
the second book.
That was Be Here, Be Here,
Be Above, Stay Within.
Stay Within, yeah.
Okay.
Stay with whichever word it was.
But it was your book.
It was my book. Yeah, that's the introduction.
So you have the beautiful idea of the window and how the window. So I think you're talking about the transparency. Oh, you said self-transcendence. You didn't say transparency.
Self-transcendence. Yeah. I think what you talk about is, again, in Chabad you're supposed to learn how to think.
Right.
It's not so much you're learning material.
Right.
You learn how to think.
Right.
I remember Abba Poltil told me that to be a real kafer, a real Epicurus, you have to learn Chassidus Chabad. Because Chassidus Chabad teaches you how to question everything, how to rip everything, all the assumptions, rip them all to pieces, and just ruthlessly.
Right.
And so if you haven't done that, you can't really be a real Epicurus. Right. You can also be a real Maimon. But you can't be a real Maimon unless you know how to rip the walls down.
Right.
So it's a way of thinking. But the trap is, I don't want to learn how to think. I just want to learn how to, if I given this word, I know it connects to this word, and that word connects to this word, and now I connect all the words. And you can ask me a question, I'll just connect the thing to a bunch of other words, and you walk away thinking, well, he said so many words, he must have answered my question, right?
Drown them in words, baby. Drown them in words.
Yeah, but what you're supposed to do is you take a hatchet and you open up the guy's brain.
Right.
And show him that there's a whole world out there they didn't know, and now he goes away realizing that his question was so small compared to the real big questions. Right. Now you're getting somewhere.
Right.
That's what Chassidus is supposed to do. It's supposed to bring you to ask the real big questions.
Right. So this idea of words and translation is a fascinating thing, because even if you look in like the Sfarim HaKadoshim, right, like there are the different strands of Jewish thought. The Rambam calls Lashon Kodesh. He says the reason it's called Lashon Kodesh is because there are no profane words in the holy tongue, right? And there's certain ideas that are beneath the language, and the language leaves them out. I think he's referring to sexuality there and so on.
Yeah.
But then you look at the Ramban in the Hakdam, and the Ramban, of course, adopted, at least in his writings, even a more mystical.
The to Sefer Bereshis.
Yes, he has a more mystical kind of strand to him, and he talks about Lashon Kodesh being because of the letters.
Yeah.
Right, and then the Mekubalim, right? There was a clear idea that like the words are not really what Lashon Kodesh is about. It's about the tzirufim, right? The words are only the surface level. There are the tzirufim, which it's about the letters, and the letters that are jumbled around. So what I'm saying is that we want this kind of easy, like you were saying, this these words that provide us these like supports. They provide us with these supports. Like, okay, I know that word. I'm familiar with that word. So now I know what you're talking about. That's what language is in general, right? Language in general is, I say table, you know what I mean. I say this, you know what I mean. But it's all ideas that are being pointed to with words.
So with the Rambam. So the Rambam a couple of times, and it's something that the Alter Rebbe takes from him. In the Mor Nevuchim, the Rambam criticizes the philosophers of the Kalam, the Arabic philosophers. When he doesn't like some idea, he says, this is not intelligence. It's not seichel. What is it? Kapach translates it as koach hamadameh. You're just comparing one thing to another.
Interesting.
But it's not understanding something. You're saying, he gives the example, you see a horse and you see a bird. So what if I take the wings of the bird and put it on a horse? I got a flying horse.
Right.
He says, that's not intelligence. It's not intelligence. It's just you're taking things that you know and putting them together.
Right.
Which we would say today, that's what a large language model does. That's our current AI. That's what it does. It's not intelligence.
Right.
He says, what is intelligence? Intelligence is you ask, what is a horse?
What is a horse, right?
What really is it?
Right.
You're sort of like imagining, what would it be like to be a horse?
Right.
What is a bird? And then once I understand this is a bird, this is a horse, they can't go together.
Right.
I understand it because I can't be both, You're understanding it through the Rambam means being that. You're getting the mahu, what is it?
Right.
It's very Aristotelian, really.
Yes.
What is it? But so, and the Alter Rebbe really goes with that a lot. That understanding means mahu, what is it? But that's a tortuous question. You have to keep on asking. I'll tell you a story. I came to Morristown. Okay, I'm learning interference, and there were some things I liked, some things I really didn't like. I didn't like the stuff that tells me that I'm bad and full of clip and also. I like the stuff that's sort of like up there and really blows your mind type of stuff. Okay, you get hooked on that. Okay, but anyways, so we had a shir in Shar Yechid V'Hamuna. That's just an amazing book. Wow, this is like blow your mind type of book. Like,
Who's giving you this year?
They brought Abba Paltil. Came because he's good friends with Avram Lipsker, the Rosh Yeshiva. So he came and gave us a shir. And he gave a good shir, a sort of following. But, I'd read many books, even as a teenager, philosophy, ideas, and so on. And this is like totally, wow, this is so many of the questions of what was going on in the 17th century, 18th century Europe, and the ideas even that you'll find in the Far East and so on. They're all like very, very crisp, like great, straight to the point, and just flip everything over. It's amazing. And it's such seichel. It's such seichel. So what bothered me was, just a minute, this doesn't make sense. What doesn't make sense? If this makes so much sense, it's all seichel, why doesn't everybody know this?
Right.
And Abba Patil wasn't around to ask the questions. What's bugging me? So somebody said to me, why don't you ask Reb Melech? Reb Melech, the guy with all the hair coming out in all directions, and the beady eyes rolling around. I'm going to go over to him. And go over to him. He's friendly, he likes you.
You're very friendly.
He speaks English. Hey, he speaks English. Yeah, he's British, he speaks English. Okay, it's a question. I got to go. So I found him in the hallway. I accosted him in the hallway. I can't come over to him. And I said, I got this question. So he smiles. Yeah, he looks. So I tell him my question. He has a big smile. And he says, let me ask you. He says, if you have a small question, and you ask me this question, and I, in return for the small question, my answer gives you a much bigger question. Which would you rather have, the small question or the big question? I said, I guess I'd rather have the small question. So he's smiling. He says, okay. So the question is, if there's only God and everything comes from God, how could I exist? It's a small question. The big answer is, you don't really exist. Now, which one would you rather have? That's why they don't want this. Okay. It doesn't mean you don't exist. It means in a certain, like in the real place, in the Yesh Amiti, this is not called existence, okay?
Chassidus is deeply destabilizing.
So you can't handle that.
Right.
You can't handle that. It's like the way the Rebbe explains the mashal of the Pikeh Ananasiv Malka. I'll take the kids. Right. The way I imagine that is that, let's say you're on a beach city, I don't know, Atlantic City or something like that. And they tell you that the president and all his entourage is coming to town, right? So who are you going to take? They need a lead host for each of these guys. So, I'll take the Minister of Commerce. I need commerce. I got a hotel. I pick the Minister of Transport. Why? I need highways here. No way you're going to take the president. Why? Because you take the president.
It's too much.
It's not your house anymore.
Right.
The reporters are all wrecking your front lawn. You can't even sleep in your own bed. You're probably sleeping in the garage. At the table, who's sitting at the head? You're going to sit at the head. It's not your house anymore. The Minister of Transport, it's your house. The president, it's not your house anymore. Right? So that's the point. That's bittul. You're asking about bittul before. So I don't care. I'm going to have it. Not this president, maybe another president, but anyways, so that's bittul. Anyways, the idea of what I'm saying is that there's a type of seichel. That's the point. There's intellect, and what you're learning with Chassidus is how to really think. It's a revelation to me now, because now we really understand thinking, because we see what's artificial thinking.
Spring is here, which means that in 2 months, many communities will be looking for a way to mark Gimel Tammuz, the Rebbe's yahrzeit. If you're looking for an event that is memorable, meaningful, and affordable, let me recommend This World is a Garden, a film and live concert production created by us here at Yuvla Media, inspired by Bosi Lgani, the first mimer, the Rebbe said. If you're a regular here at HFL, you know that Bosi Lgani is something that we think about and talk about a lot. And in this production, we use the power of cinematic filmmaking and a live concert by a string quartet to bring the beauty of Bosi Lgani to your community and your audience in a way that they've never seen, heard, or experienced it before. The production has already been hosted by Kabad houses around the country and has drawn wonderful reviews. Our package comes with everything that you need to put in the production: the film's original arrangements for string quartet, publicity materials, everything besides the string quartet, which we recommend that you hire locally to save on travel costs. To find out more about this production, please visit thisworldisagarden.com. Again, thisworldisagarden.com. And now, back to the show. Has that really changed the way you think about your own writing looking back? You feel like you have to revisit what you thought writing was, or what you think writing is?
Yeah, I think so.
Really? Is it causing like a kind of crisis? Or like
crisis is good.
Yes,
yeah.
It's causing a crisis in how you estimate your own work up to this point.
I mean, a lot of things we do, because it turns out that so much of what we thought was intelligence is really artificial intelligence.
Wow.
Mimicry. That's the thing that human beings are best at. Mimicry.
Right. Like monkeys.
Yeah, so most of what you learn in especially as an undergrad student in university, you learn in mimicry.
Right.
And it's an easy thing to go through yeshiva and just learn to mimic.
Right.
And you can become a mashpia in Lubavitch. Just so at which point do you stop mimicking and start actually thinking? And I have to think, am I mimicking or am I thinking? Which one am I doing over here?
Right.
How do I know?
So how do you know?
I don't know. I gotta figure this out. I gotta figure this out.
You think that's why people are so scared by AI?
You know how you can tell?
Yeah.
There's only two words in the English language that AI has not figured out and cannot figure out. Yes and no.
Really?
Yeah. So therefore, it won't say, I don't know. So it's when you're
No,
trying.
yes and no with a K?
No.
Yes and no.
Yeah, because you can't know those words from context. Everything, its learning model is only through context.
I see.
There's no context to tell you, in many cases at least, what's the difference between those two words.
Right.
Contextually, they could be exactly the same thing. So therefore,
You're saying because it represents your choice, your will?
it's not a thing.
I see.
No, in a sense, yes, in a sense, has exactly the same place.
Right.
Doesn't change. It just switches everything around. But you can't know that from context.
I see.
So, but the point is, as soon as you're able to say, I don't understand this. This doesn't make sense to me. I don't have an answer to this. So then that's evidence that you're really thinking.
Interesting.
As long as you feel you have the answer, you're not thinking. You don't know that you're thinking.
So you're saying that when you, what I'm understanding is if you're learning a mimer, and you're swimming through it, you're not understanding.
Oh, for sure not. I
You're
heard this.
not understanding a thing.
I heard this from Label Kaplan, so Rosh Yeshiva now in Montreal. He was a Rosh Yeshiva in Seattle.
Oh, you were in Seattle.
Yeah, in Seattle for 2 years, in Shlich in Seattle. So he told me, he says, if you learn the sugya in the Gemara, and you learned it well, you got it down, it's all galactic, you can say it over perfectly, you must have gotten something wrong. For sure you got something wrong. Because it's impossible. It's impossible. Das Berish should fit into Das Nevi. This is God's mind. You know? But I think with any intellect that's true, as soon as you say, I got this idea down, I got it down pat, I can explain everything with certainty, you're messed up, you know. You're not thinking. You're not thinking. There's always something that's not fitting over here.
Right.
That's what reality is about. That's what real thinking is all about. So this certainty that we get out of AI, that's the best proof that it's not real thinking.
Right. So then how do you understand learning? Because the question then becomes is, if you're learning in order to understand, what you're pointing at is in a way that you only begin to understand by not understanding.
So there's a beautiful line from the Ramak in Pardes Ramonim. He says that if somebody is learning to gain knowledge, better he weren't born.
Huh.
That's not what learning is about.
And the knowledge is here.
He's talking about
anyway.
learning Torah.
Right.
Any sort of learning.
No, but the knowledge is here. What do we gain by you just getting it for yourself anyhow?
Yeah, so you just got another... learning means anything that you learn, you have to rewire your entire brain. Mm-hmm. Which should be catastrophic, you know, rewire the entire brain. But we have ways of doing it slowly, and it's called like hypocrisy and consistency, but that's necessary for survival, because you can't, every time you learn something, change absolutely everything that was there. Right. So you do it slowly, right? So we're inconsistent, fine, but it means that, wow, according to that, everything I thought before and the way I thought about it was upside down, you know. I got to rearrange everything. Now that's the way, when we came out of Rabbi Yoel's Shir, that was the feeling. That I just turned everything upside down for me. I have to rethink everything. He just smashed all my idols, right? He destroyed the whole thing. I got to build everything back up again. I'm in recovery mode now. So that was the idea. So that's a real good shear. When you're really learning means everything changes from this point on.
How do you and that does sound exciting. There's no question about it. And anyone who learns probably has that kind of memory or knows what that feeling is like to explode ideas, and you feel in a way your brain light up, right? Where it's like boom, something just happened here, and it is it's exciting. It's fun.
I'll give you a good example where you see it not working.
Right, that's what I was going to ask.
How
does it not become destructive?
Right, but I can. No, people want to avoid this. They want to avoid having to restructure everything. So they get, wow, that's a big wow, but now immediately trying to fit it into everything that they know, and instead of readjusting everything that they knew before, instead squeeze it in so it's going to fit. When it doesn't fit, you're putting a square peg in a round hole, or the other way around. So when people come to me and say, I just read this self-help book, this psychology book, and it's mamish what Chassidus is saying.
You don't like that?
What are you doing?
Okay, you're my friend now.
What are you doing? You're saying, it's just the same as... It can't be.
Yes.
It can't be.
Yes. Amen.
It's like the perennialists who say, all religions are saying the same thing.
Yes.
What are we talking about?
How is that possible?
No two people are saying the same thing.
Yes.
Every person, who, even if they tell you the same thing, is saying something different.
Right.
Look at the diversity instead of trying to make it's so easy. Everybody's saying the same thing.
Yes.
It's all the same thing. We've got a soul. We've got to be spiritual, love. No, look for the differences, not the sameness. That's what makes life exciting. What's exciting about another person is not that he's the same as me. He's different than me. That's what's interesting. You don't get married to somebody who's the same as you. What a boring life. You want somebody who does things completely differently. If you leave the toilet seat down, she leaves it up. That's something that's going to be different.
Oh, wait, is that a thing?
Or the toilet paper is around this way, around
it's got to be a menu that leaves the toilet seat up in most cases.
Yeah, stereotypes, whatever.
All right.
But anyways, you want something.
You're a real renegade, is what you're saying.
Anyways, you want Ein Day Sein Shabbos is beautiful, right?
Yes.
And you want to embrace that, but as soon as you say this is saying the same as no,
yes,
saying something different.
Amen, amen, brother. Yeah. So you're saying that comes from that's almost like there's this moment of explosion. There's this moment of insight, what Chassidus calls chachma, perhaps, and instead of kind of following that light, instead of being blinded by that light and following it to its conclusion, you try to put the genie back in the bottle and rearrange things to make yourself feel comfortable, almost like a fright.
Yeah, Moshe is there in the Midbar, Midian, and he sees this bush, right?
Right.
Fire, birds burning, but it's not burning. How many people do you think passed by that bush before Moshe Rabbeinu?
Yeah.
And they saw bushes burning.
That's my grandfather's favorite question.
Yeah. But I could imagine that they come by the bush and interesting. Well, I guess I'll come back later. We'll be burned. Or I take a selfie.
Right.
The tour guide comes with a bus. Everybody comes out, takes pictures, gets back, and leaves. And they say, okay, so there must be some trick. Something's going on over there. Moshe Rabbeinu says, this doesn't make sense.
Right.
I got to figure. I got to go and see. And it's still not making sense to me.
Right.
Oh, that's the real sense. But people are afraid of that.
Wow. So you're saying, I keep on saying you're saying, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. It's just
it's a good paraphrase.
It's a figure of speech that I need to improve. But the point that you're making here is that Moshe Rabbeinu's first step into leadership was an acknowledgement that he didn't understand.
Yeah. Embracing a paradox. And there is a paradox over here. There is something I'm not able to solve. At least in my mind, it's a paradox. Maybe in some higher reality, it works. But for me, this is totally paradoxical. And I can handle that. I'm amazed by it. I'll try to figure it out. But the fact that I haven't been able to resolve it doesn't mean it's not the reality.
But how? The question I have, I'm not disagreeing at all with what
Yeah.
you're saying, and I think it's obvious to anybody that learns Chassidus that paradox is, if there's one word that fits Chassidus as much as no word can describe Chassidus, but this is the word if I had to choose one. How to me the problem with paradox, or the paradox of paradox, to be overly cute, is that when you become comfortable with paradox, or when paradox becomes the norm, it loses its grip, it loses its power, right? Like how does Chassidus stay a paradox?
Comfort is death.
Yes.
The most comfortable position for any living organism is to be dead.
Yes.
Life means that there's a dynamo, there's two opposite poles that are struggling one against the other. That's life.
Right.
That's how you create an engine, how you get anything to move. You create, you disturb the equilibrium.
Right.
As soon as you reach equilibrium, it's gone, right? Like we're talking about marriage. That's what's beautiful about a marriage. It never reaches equilibrium. Never. It can't. So this is not like two pieces that fit together perfectly. They never fit together perfectly.
You're really destroying all the idols today.
So
Bashert isn't like two hearts beating as one? That's not what...
Oh, man. How dull. How boring. Boring. A flashback. I was in sixth grade, and I had this friend. I don't know what he must have become a gangster or something. His name was Barry Marsh, I remember. And Barry Marsh is telling me, they're talking about the Aquarian Age and all this. This is the Aquarian Age. I don't know, there's some play on Broadway called Hair and the Aquarian Age, and it was a big deal. All the top pop singers were singing about the Aquarian Age. He says, if the Aquarian Age, everything's going to be peaceful, like it's going to be peace. Like he says, if there's no motorbike bombing down your road in the middle of the night, it's going to be boring.
Yeah.
It just stuck with me. I never haven't met him in many years. But
Do you think he's actually a criminal, or do you think he's like a boring suburban dad? Probably the latter.
By now, maybe.
Statistically, he's
maybe he gave up on his dream.
It's for sure a boring.
He got
boomer.
the motorbike. It wasn't so cool.
Yeah.
Okay, but that life is the struggle to take over your own life, right? It's much easier to just be the debris floating on the waves, but just wherever the waves take you, But to be alive means to make your own life, to decide where you want to go, and to force in equilibrium over and over again, to destabilize everything at every point.
Right.
Not look for comfort. Comfort is like, the life you go to school, you get your degree, you get the job. At 65, you retire, you go fishing and die. What was that all about? No.
Right.
Or my parents did this to me, my teachers did this to me, so therefore I'm a victim and I can't accomplish anything, and so then it's not my fault, right? You go up to the Beis Din Shalomila, and it wasn't my fault, my parents, and then it's all four. Life means you take charge, you disturb everything, you make trouble, you destabilize things, and stuff happens, and maybe it'll be good.
Right.
It's risky, but it could be good. That's real life.
L'shanis teva midesov.
Yeah.
Right. L'shanis teva midesov is Chassidus came to literally take on the very thing that supposedly is nature itself.
Yeah.
Right. Not just the midas ativim, but the actual nature of the midas, which that's who I am. No, change that too. Yeah.
Yeah. If it's that what the Rebbe Rishab told his son, the Frick Rebbe, told him that a person who's born with good midas and a good seichel has a disadvantage over the person who's born with real problems. Why? Because nobody's ever going to tell him, fix up your act.
Right.
Nobody's ever going to tell you, you're making a mess over here. You really are not a nice person. Maybe it's not going to happen. So you'll never go to the doctor. You'll never go to see and plead with his Rebbe. Tell me, how am I going to fix this? He's never going to cry about it. The guy who's messed up, okay, maybe he'll continue being messed up, but he's got at least a better chance that he's going to fix something up. And he'll probably never become as nice a guy as the guy who was born a nice guy. But he'll be able to say, I accomplished this. I did this. Okay, so I'm still a shegutz, but I'm less of a shegutz than before. And why? Because I did it. I did it. So that's what's valuable is when you change, and changing means destabilizing things.
You're reminding me of a story. Maybe you remember who it was with. I think it was a quite famous story. There's a chossid on his deathbed who said his whole life basically it could be summed up as a fight with the Yetzer Hara. He lands a blow on the Yetzer Hara, or the Nefesh Bahamis, I don't know what he called it, and then the Yetzer Hara lands a blow back on him, and they're in a sparring match, landing a blow. He's like, my only wish is I land the last blow. It's a vart, right? Like you like it. The goal isn't even to win. The goal is just to be fighting to the end.
At least you're fighting.
Right? No, because once you win, you're dead. So you have to fight all the way to the end.
Yeah. So Woody Allen said that he found the perfect strategy for dealing with his Yetzer Hara. So he says, perfect strategy. Just complete surrender.
I was going to say, marry my stepdaughter.
No, we're not going there. So, okay, all I care really is this is my life. And I have to question over and over again, are you living your life, or is it your environment running your life? Which one? Are you your own agent? Do you have any agency here? Or are you just being that large language model that's just a product of external circumstances, and that's it? So that's over and over again. So that's the Haskalah of Chassidus and the Aveda of Chassidus. Haskalah of Chassidus means just breaking down walls and questioning everything. And the Aveda of Chassidus is breaking down your own walls, breaking down, well, they call it comfort zone nowadays, even though, of course, it's not the same thing, because nothing ever is the same thing. Breaking down the teva means your comfort zone.
You think comfort zone is not encompassing enough like teva?
There's got to be something wrong.
Look, comfort zone is way too comfortable, that's for sure.
Okay, just breaking out of whatever feels comfortable, whatever you are, which is your teva, your regulus, and so on. That's
what's your position on this idea called pain?
Pain, yeah, pain is good, yeah.
No, pain is good. No,
I know I'm alive.
No, that everyone is in pain, and therefore.
Yeah, good.
No, I'm just playing.
No, that drives people to do something. I mean, it could drive people. A lot of people just drives them to wallow in the pain, but.
Right.
But I had a traumatic childhood, thank God. Baruch Hashem, yeah. And a lot of struggles left from that, but I'm sure that it's still driving me in ways that I wouldn't have. Things I wouldn't be able to experience today.
Homesick for Lubavitch is brought to you by Yuvla Media, a boutique video production company servicing the Kabad and Jewish community. Since opening 10 years ago, Yuvla Media has pushed the boundaries of artistic and thoughtful storytelling in the community, with an insistence on there always being a memorable story as well as a beautiful and striking visual image that we believe is second to none. Over the years, we have worked with Chabad organizations around the country, as well as large organizations like Boni Olam, Torah Masorah, and Atzalathon, guided by the belief that your story is absolutely worth telling with depth and creativity. If you are looking to tell your story with a video, please reach out to us at hello@yuvlamedia.com. Again, that is hello@yuvlamedia.com. A link can be found in the show notes. And now, back to the podcast. Okay, so let me open this up a little bit, because I think people listening to this, I mean, by now already they're used to this podcast not exactly towing the line on the mental health speak or the therapeutic mindset speak that's pervasive today. But I want to open it up because I don't want to be frivolous about it, right? A lot of people will say, okay, good for you. You look back at your traumatic childhood or whatever you mean by traumatic childhood, a childhood that was that had its problems, you look back at it with a sense of you have I don't know if the word's positive. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you said Baruch Hashem, right? And they're good for you, but there are many kids and many adults who are suffering from their troubled childhood, and they're suffering doubly by the fact that people tell them buck up and just deal with it, right? And so that has led to this kind of, I would say, reversal of that thinking, or swinging to the other side, where every school has a team of mental health experts, and just this kind of insistence that you have to take care of it. You can't just embrace it as part of the journey. And I feel like, besides going to like the question of who's right and who's wrong, I think if you go deeper than that, especially in context of this conversation, it's a question of is this idea of constant like destruction and rebirth and constant fighting and like sparring with your own demons, is that sustainable at scale? Like, you could have an individual does it, you could have a person who does it in individual moments, but is that sustainable on a communal level at scale?
Okay, first, I don't have a lot of answers over here. There are a lot of things that I don't know, but just make it easier so we can actually come up with something. First of all, there's a fallacy of scale, which means that just because something's true at one point on the scale and not true in another point of the scale doesn't mean that it's not true. It's true in this place. So for certain types of trauma, people who've been through trauma, you can't apply the same things that are going to work for other people at a lesser point. So there are extreme cases, outliers, that it's just, so don't deal with that, because that's not going to solve problems for most of the people.
Right.
But what I can say, I wouldn't have said even a few years ago, I had a traumatic childhood, Baruch Hashem. But by this point, I think I can, with some degree of honesty. And the way I look at it is similar to what the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, that by a person who has real averis and does real tshuva, Zdenes of nice little Kazachias, Reish Lakish had a traumatic youth. Okay, so Zdenes of nice little Kazachias. So besides looking at it as meaning like real sins, you can say also the trauma that a person's gone through, the pain that a person's gone through, can also become, he can turn them around. But you have to do something for that to happen. You have to do something dramatic for that to happen. And it has to come from you. And it's something that takes time. That's the difference with this type of tshuva. This is a tshuva that takes time and takes real proactive work, and takes something very deep inside the person. It's not, don't think about it. You can't not think about it. It's driving you. But when you do think about it, you got to come head on and really be ready to do something about it. So there are people that I had to forgive. It's very hard to forgive someone. My own father ran away when I was a little kid, and I had to forgive him. That was not easy.
Is he alive, or just in your mind?
No, he's not alive.
You have to forgive him in your heart.
Yeah. But I knew what he'd done.
Right.
It was not nice.
No. And you carried that till recently, is what you're saying?
Fairly recently. I had a teacher in fourth grade who was really torture. Because I was the ADD kid who was spacing out and so on. She couldn't handle that, And nightmares from that till I was, say, 50 years old. Nightmares till my wife told me, you have to forgive her because the nightmares are getting worse and worse.
You had actual nightmares?
Nightmares. I'm back in fourth grade again.
You wake up middle of the night?
Yeah.
Wow.
And over again. I'm back in fourth grade.
Wow.
And my wife says to me, well, you have to forgive Mrs. McDonald. I sat on the edge of the bed, and I said, Mrs. McDonald, I don't know where you are now, right now, like in which mother of Gehenna. But I understand,
Looking down.
Maybe probably you really wanted to be a college professor, and you ended up teaching fourth grade, and it was frustrating for you. And you had this kid that was like not towing the line, and
Right.
okay, spacing out. You couldn't handle it. Okay, why should I carry Mrs. McDonald? She's not running my life. Okay, so I forgive you. I just had to say the words out loud. I didn't really have to feel it with all my heart. I just had to say the words out loud, and the nightmares were gone.
So was this so to tie
And the
it
same thing with my father, which took more years.
took more years. So to tie it back, was this like you came to this recognition purely by age? I doubt that it's just a matter of time, because there are people that hold on this forever.
Yeah.
But was it by age? Was it by like therapy and kind of?
It wasn't any therapy. It was just at that point in life I was ready. My wife had to tell me, this is what you have to do. If she'd have told me 10 years earlier, I wouldn't have been able to.
So that's what I'm asking. What changed? Because it seems like you're connecting this to the way the Chassidic mindset of constant destruction and reinvention, and is there a connection there?
I don't know. I think that I was more confident in myself by that point, and the sense that forgiving was really, in many ways, a sense of taking charge. That I'm no longer the victim. I'm the benevolent one who here is forgiving you. That turns the table around. It's no longer you doing this to me, but I am forgiving you. I think that was a very, very important part of it. And for that, I had to have a certain degree of self-confidence. And that's, a lot of...
No, but I'm asking, is it a mental self-confidence? Is it a spiritual self-confidence that you're talking about?
I don't know the difference.
Fair. No, because in the context of the conversation, it came up in conversation about is Chassidus something that can be scaled? The approach of being able to say, thank God for the struggles of my life.
Yeah, so because be some people who were, really terribly sexually abused as children over, I'm not going to tell them.
Right.
I'm telling what worked in my situation, which was traumatic enough that I'm having nightmares in my 50s.
Right.
So it did have an effect, and I was able to, and it was that sense. I felt strong enough. I'm coming from a position of enough strength that I can forgive. But when we're weak and we think everybody's out to get us and everybody else is controlling my life and I'm a victim, so then I don't know that you could do that, or even that it would work. I don't know. That's the first thing I heard from.
But you're fitting it into this Zdenis Naslik Azachia's framework.
Yeah, you're turning around. I heard from Gershon Schuster, and he told me he remembers a Fabrengen in Montreal when. Who was it? Came to Moshe Morozov. Came to Montreal.
Who lived there?
Who lived there? He came there from Russia.
Zalman Morozov.
Zalman Morozov. Zalman Morozov was there.
Yeah.
And a certain mashpir who liked to do this was laying into a bacher, a young bacher, maybe Mesifta bacher, laying into him, like they do, or at least used to do it. And Zalman Morozov stands up and says...
He wasn't a mashpia, by the way.
He wasn't. He just come there recently from Russia. Says, this is not the way we did in Rusland.
Really?
Yeah, not the way. A young bacher is like a tree. You fatten it up, you make it bigger, like a cow. Make it fatten up. And when the tree's big enough, then you chop it. First you have to build him up.
Yeah, that's good.
First you have to build him up.
That's good.
So that's something... There's such truth to it. The only way you can have bittul is from a position of strength.
That's good. The
only way you have chachna, shiflus, mevachinle, is when in Tiferes Rabbi Lipsker.
You're saying
mevachinle. You can't be mevatish.
A twig.
Yeah. There's nothing there to be mevatish. Oh, it's a beautiful thing. I only found this thing. There's a mimer from the Alter Rebbe about the mezig and the shaman boguf. So I know 3 different versions of the mimer. There's from the Mittler Rebbe saying it, the Rebbe Rishab, I think it's 9 base, and the Rebbe says it over in the end of Anya Ladedi Tafshin Yud base. So the Mittler Rebbe, it's talking about, you can have a great neshama within a fantastic Edel Gulf. Disaster. It's just going to burn up like
Right.
a big fire in a little wick. It's just going to burn up.
Right.
Okay. You have a great neshama and put it in a grubba gulf. That's Nimrod. You're going to have also disaster.
Right.
A grubba niderek neshama in a grubba gulf is the worst.
Right.
What hope is there?
Right.
You just have to break the gulf so it can burn.
Right.
Or you can have a niderek neshama in an edel gulf. It's perfect. You can make tachlis a birur. You can have a real birur there because the fire's not going to just burn everything out. Just find what's good and burn out what's good. And the wick holds it very good. So the Mittler Rebbe says over this mimer and says, in the end, B'dorenu ikvasut Mashiach is a grubba guf with a nidrak and a neshama. Have to break the guf. The Rebbe Shab says over the mimer, and as far as I recall, doesn't say what the neshamas are today. The Rebbe says over the mimer and says, Bikvis of the Mashiach is a nidrak and neshama with an edel guf. An edel guf. And talks about the Aveda of seeing Elokus in a shkacha pratis and in a very physical way, was different. It was different today. There's something happened to us. Maybe it was the traumas of the mid-20th century. Something happened to us today that were different. And it's taken a long time in Lubavitch to realize that this is not Russia anymore. or maybe we started doing crazy things in America that we didn't even do in Rusland. I don't know.
In the name of Russia, right?
Yeah, in the name of Russia.
Yeah.
They took the trauma to Stockholm Syndrome and they applied it to their kids.
Yeah.
Who knows? It's hard, but for sure we're different. And the Eitzah is not to change, but to go back to the real tamtzis of the Amos, find what it's really about and apply that instead of just the mimicking. Mimicking what you imagine to have been a Chassidus Shifra in Russia. Don't do that.
That's another very interesting idea of the mimicry, where it's not you're mimicking ideas, you're mimicking culture.
Yeah.
But where does that leave us? I mean, does it not frighten you at all? Because what you're pointing at is like a lot of people are scared of AI. That AI is going to take their jobs, which a lot of jobs are going to become extra. But what you're pointing at is almost the reverse, which is the scary thing of AI. It's gonna force us to become original, and God knows where that's gonna take us. To
become human,
right? And which is the opposite of most people are like AI is gonna make us transhuman, like we're gonna forget what it means to be human. And you're like it may force us to become even more human, and in a way that's even more scary because where does that lead us?
Yeah, the human being is the radical element in the universe,
right?
And maybe we haven't been enough of that yet. And we'll discover that we're not being what we really are, is that radical element.
So touch that up in the Chassidic context, because one of the scariest things, I mean, this is more a thesis of mine, but I think it's quite evident that one of a subcurrent of fear in Lubavitch culture, if you want to call it that, is change is first of all, it's an unknown. Where's it going to take us? And because there's no alive Rebbe at the helm who's like telling us this, that, like the way it used to be, where they would say, "This is what you do today. This is what you do tomorrow." If we change, are we kind of departing from that? So change is not good.
So a basic thesis in my mind. I can't be certain, but this is something I feel a lot of certainty of, is that Torah, Yiddishkeit, is about change. It's a force of change in the world. Just as the human being is this force of instability, the radical element of the radical element of humanity is the Jew. And within Torah Judaism, the radical element is Kabad. It's just that real change is not when you're flying in the air. Real change is when you have a structure beneath you. You know where you have been. And you're building on where you have been. Because if you're not building on something, you're going in circles. Like most of philosophy does. Most of philosophy is just coming back in circles, like the Bedouins in the Sahara Desert. They're going around in circles, but the topography looks different because the wind has shifted the sand dunes. So people think they're making so many things today are not progress. Why? And then why are they not? They're called progress. They're not progressive. Why not? Because people don't know the past. They don't know what they're building. It's not accumulative. Progress, change, is only true change when it's accumulative. So Jews have a way of creating accumulative progress. Halacha is a form of accumulative progress.
Right.
And the way we learn Chassidus, the Rebbe made what the Alter Rebbe presented us into a system where you can accumulatively progress. And that's real change. That's where there's real change in the world. So the Orthodox world in general balks at this. No, we don't want change.
Right.
Change is dangerous. No.
Right.
That was the whole reaction to the whole Mashiach things back in the 80s. The Orthodox world. What was so scary about Mashiach? It's change.
Right.
I mean, aside from you touting your Rebbe's Mashiach and not our, but besides the ego thing behind it, was just changes. It's so scary. These are people who, they like being frum because they don't like change.
Right.
It's the frum personality.
Right.
It's just teva. Right. But Chabad is about to change teva. You go to Malam in a teva.
Right.
So we want change, but the change is real change. So we have so many things today that people tout as change that nothing to do with progress at all. It's just efficiency, bureaucracy, and they call it change. But what we are doing in Chabad and Lubavitch is creating real change in the world, which has a lot to do with instability as well. So it's there. So we have to embrace that and know how to do it properly.
What do you mean? It has to do with the world's instability or creates instability?
In order that whenever there's change, there's going to be instability. You can't have one without the other. But you do it in a way where you know that this is real change and it's real progress, and you're really going places.
So the Rebbe, you said the Rebbe built a system, which I love that. I love that framing. The Rebbe built a system, and by definition, a system, I think it's by definition, is it's not a canon. It's not like a closed book. The whole point of a system is that it allows for it's a framework that then allows for growth, right? If you have it, if it's just
not a closed system,
right?
It's an open system,
right.
But it's a system where you can work within it and know that you are actually creating change here and not repeating the same thing, and you're building upon accumulated wisdom. Why do you have to reject wisdom of the past in order to progress? That doesn't make sense. Progress means you're accumulating more wisdom.
But this is a radical thought, I think, for Lubavitch thinking, because for decades, for generations, for centuries, the system was open in the sense that Rebbeim could advance it.
Yeah, no, don't take a look. In Tanya, the Alter Rebbe says right away, "Mipi Sfarim, Mipi Seifrim," right? So everything's just Lekutei Amarim, just collecting and so on. So it sounds like it's saying, I'm just going to repeat, what right. Every time there's a Maimer Chazal or a Posek brought, it's a radical new meaning to it.
Right.
This is not the way we understood it before. And then the Alter Rebbe is showing you that, no, that's what he really meant. If that's what he really meant, how come nobody knew that's what? It's a totally different meaning. Yeah, but that's the true meaning. So that's a way of showing that the progress is accumulative. I'm making something new and very radical, but it's still got its roots. Radical means that you ripped it up from its roots. No, this type of radical means I'm going down to the real roots and showing you what it's really about, and you end up with something completely new. Huh. And that's true change. So people get the idea that true change means rejecting the ancients were fools. who was that? Francis Bacon. The ancients were fools, right? That's not progress.
Right. It's also silly.
Yes, you build on that, but you go back and say, but what did they really mean?
Right.
And what was their perspective on it? And you find deeper and deeper wisdom. It's something like an organism has to adapt to a new environment and basically looks in its DNA. And where do I have a way of dealing with this newness in my DNA? That's what we do. That's
But what does Lubavitch accumulate in the past 30 years? How does Lubavitch, what are you suggesting Lubavitch has accumulated after Gimel Tammuz? Like, what is there to add to this magnificent work of the seven Rebbeim? How do we add to that? How do we, are we allowed to change that?
What I remember of 770, I came in Lamed Hay, and so the second half of the Lameds and the Mems is that the Chassidim were children. The Rebbe had to tell us everything. And with a busha, there's no seder, and the Rebbe's telling people to make a seder over here. And the Rebbe's taina was like those words. Even when they scream ad masa, it's only because I told them to. So I think that, and this is the way Rabbi Yol explained things after Gimel Tammuz, and I feel it rings true, is that the tachlis is that we have to do it on our own. It has to come from us. We have to grow up, basically. And I think we've been very successful at that. Not completely. There's still people who are saying, HaRebbe Hivtiach, HaRebbe Yekayim. The Rebbe was Mevtiach that we will be Mekayim. No. So there's that growing up, taking ownership, that we should take ownership of it.
What does ownership mean? I'm trying to drill down on that. Ownership means, I'm guessing what you're going to say. It definitely doesn't mean mimicry of just going through the motions and saying what the Rebbe told us to say and saying the Sikha over again and again. Or is that what it means? Like, what does it mean?
For me personally, ownership means what resonates the most for me in Lubavitch is Chassidus and the vision of the Baal Shem Tov, and it bothers me that in my mind that hasn't happened. Everybody keeps on telling me, "Oh no, it's so," and I don't see the Hafatzas Amanos past Schenectady Avenue or even there. So to me, therefore, I have to take Sefer Atanya and make it accessible. I have to take the Maimarim and make them accessible. And that doesn't mean translating the words. That means making accessible. And I have to understand, I have to go deep into it. But I have to also take the risk that I'll get it wrong. Because if I don't take any risks, I'm not playing any game.
There's no ownership. There's no ownership without risk. Period.
Right.
Period.
Right. If you're playing it safe, you have not taken ownership.
Right.
So I'll burn for a few lines that I put in there or whatever, but I'll get something done.
You're actually worried about burning? You're not worried about burning.
I might hurt.
No, but you're worried about burning for doing that? You think like that? You think you're actually going to be punished for making a mistake?
Actually, they'll find much bigger things.
That's
anyway.
what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
much bigger things. This is how the Tzemach Tzedek explains. What's the answer in Tanya? He says the answer gets lost. Barichas Advarim, the answer gets lost. What's the answer? What's the answer?
To the original question.
Yeah, the original question. What were the big questions? Whatever. He says the real answer to the question is, okay, so you mess up, so you won't be Beinoni all the time. But Yafashachas, you'll have one moment of tshuva ma'asim tovim. It's worth it. Read us in the Shama for Olam Haza. Even if you're Rasha Kol Yama, but for one moment you were tshuva ma'asim tovim, the whole thing was worth it. You see, that's the way I understand it. That's the whole point. So, which means I'm going to take risks. I'm going to try my best, but this is what's important to me. I'm going to take ownership, And what did I write there? The Rebbe didn't have followers. Nobody could keep up. The Rebbe only had leaders, those who rebelled along with him. That's what we have to become. That's what we have to do. Like, go out and make up your mind. Many times that the Rebbe wrote the people complain about a shliach and his decisions, and the Rebbe would write back. I know in a place where I was, that his decisions are my decisions. What he decided is my decision. So, and talk about decisions that we didn't consult, but he made this decision. The Rebbe is okay. That's your decision. That's my decision. So you have to make those decisions. You have to go ahead and do. I think Bechlal and Lubavitch were good at that.
At what?
Taking it on our shoulders and being a maverick and going ahead, but we need to do more.
It needs to do more.
Taking ownership, yeah. That's post Gimel Thomas is about taking ownership.
And taking ownership, at least one of the symptoms of taking ownership, or one of the signs of taking ownership, is that there's risk.
Yeah.
Is that there's risk.
You can't be a scaredy cat. Lubavitch ain't for sissies.
Lubavitch ain't for sissies. Fair. Yeah.
I mean, you're still going to go and ask the Rebbe's bracha and the Eitzav dracha and write in a doch and everything, but still you got to have some Azasponim here. How's the part from Peretz Machkin? Azpanim Gehinnim, you know about it?
No.
So Beishis Panim, better he stay in Gan Eden. Because if he goes out in the world and he sees his neighbor has 2 cars in the driveway and I only have 1, it's going to hurt him. He's be a busha to him.
Right.
You want to send somebody out in Shlichus the Gehinnim, you need an Azpanim.
Right. You need to be a little bit of a you know what?
A chutzpah, yeah.
Yeah, I was just talking about it with Tzvi Kilov, the beautiful Rishima on the needle on the step of the mikveh. You're talking about cannonballing in the mikveh, but then the Rebbe talks about the Jew being the needle.
Yeah.
The mashal is because a needle pricks, a needle makes a Jew has to make, which can result in context of a conversation, results in the needle becoming tameh, which is why it needs to be on the mikveh, because yeshus can go overboard, but you have to take that risk. Mm-hmm. So, which is what I wanted to ask is, like, how does you're saying to risk and take ownership, but how does that go together with the obedience and the discipleship that a chossid has and the loyalty that a chossid has? Do they go together, or is the risking that also?
You say the K word, the K word, the Kabbalah soul.
I haven't said that word for a long time, but yeah.
I don't think there's any term that's been so abused.
Well, that's a good way of getting Bachram in line.
In line, yeah. You're running an institution, and you need everybody to be so much easier, so much more efficient, as everybody is doing the same thing.
Yeah, if it could turn them into sheep, like that movie in Pinocchio.
So you tell them, look, it says in Chassidus, you have to do what I say.
Right.
There is no why. It says the principle with you come into his office, sent into his office, and he says, look at the alphabet up there. What's missing? A, B, Z, X, Z. Why? There is no why. Okay, so that becomes Kabbalah Sil, Malchus Shemayim, and you just degraded the whole Chassidus if that's what Kabbalah Soul is. Yeah, I mean, look, a kid has to know to respect his father, and the Talmud has to know to respect the Mishpia. It bugs me to no end that in Lubavitch you don't stand up when the Rosh Yeshiva comes in. I think it's an avila.
Because why?
And you didn't call them by their first name and those things.
Because it
doesn't make any sense to me. I think it comes from communist Russia, comrade type of thing.
Really?
Yeah, that's what I think. Yeah.
Interesting.
But that's my theory. Okay?
No, fair.
But I don't think that Kabbalah's all means be a robot and just do as I say. I don't think that's Kabbalah Sol. Kabbalah Sol means you have a job to do.
Are you allowed to have a question on what the Rebbe says? Like this is going back to, I'm not just trying to trap you, but in the conversation you're talking about like you only begin to understand when you're not mimicking, when you have a question. Are you allowed to question what the Rebbe says? And say like this.
Question in English has two different meanings.
You're allowed to say, this doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, of course. You have to say that. You're not learning until you say, this doesn't make sense to me.
Or like what's being said here doesn't feel right to me.
Yes, as in Margot the Befume the Rebbe, there's a mime of the Rebbe. The Rebbe gives it's a sharp distinction between limited Torah and Kiyum mitzvahs. When you're learning Torah, you have to ask. Mm-hmm. When you're doing the mitzvah, this is how you're supposed to do. You're doing it.
Right.
But if you learn Torah and say, Abai says like this and Rabbi says like this, why? What do you mean? The Gemara says, the Abai says like this and Rabbi says like this. Yes, but why? Does it make sense to you? If you're not asking that, does it make sense to me? You're not learning. Right? It has to be your seichel. Mm-hmm. That's it. So if the Rebbe says something and Lamasol, okay, I'm coming from a secular education background, and the Rebbe says when it says the world is 5,785 years old, it means literally that. Okay, that's immediately I'm supposed to say, okay, that's it. I understand. I don't understand. I have to go about learning and understanding. It has to make sense to me. Am I going to say, well, obviously, that's not correct? No, I'm not going to say not correct. It means I don't understand.
How do you live though? I mean, that's a bit extreme way to put it, but how do you manage those kind of questions with the devoutness of being a chossid? It doesn't.
You have the humility to say, so I don't understand. There are a lot of things I don't understand.
Right.
I heard it several times. The Rebbe such a bit to it. For eine Sachen ich verstehe nicht. The Rebbe would say himself.
On himself.
I'm himself. So it's another thing I don't understand.
Right.
Okay. You have to be able to live with understanding that there are things you don't understand.
Right.
That's rachvas hamechin.
Right.
Only a pinhead everything has to make sense. Okay?
Yeah.
No, there are things in the world I don't understand. I see a 747 flying in the air with 200 people on it and it's flying in the air. You tell me I understand that? It still doesn't make any sense to me. It's in the air. What's it doing up there? That makes no sense. But it's happening. Okay.
Right.
It's happening. So a lot of things like that. I don't understand. Do I understand how I put a little seed in the ground and it comes up in big trees over there? And they tell me, what's the tree made of? You know what trees are made of? You ever look into this? What is a tree made of? When you plant a seed in the ground and a seedling and you get a big, big tree out of it, is there less earth over there? What's the tree made of?
Right.
You know what it's made of? It's made out of the carbon dioxide in the air, which is something like 0.02% of the air or something like that. Well, it's made out of thin air.
The soil swallows up the air?
No. The tree is photosynthesized, taking carbon out of the air, and that's becoming a tree. Now, I'm looking at this tree, and I think it's made of carbon in the air. It makes no sense to me. That's ridiculous.
How does it start?
I'm telling you, the whole thing from beginning to end is like totally... And anything in the world.
So when Chassidus talks about Kecha Tzemeach in the Mamarim, it's legit. Science doesn't have a better explanation, is what you're saying.
There's all sorts of things that have no, like, the scientists, the mimicry of the academic world, like everything we're explaining everything. And when you start taking it apart, you didn't explain a thing. You just described what's going on. But what's going on, that doesn't make sense.
Right.
How could it be? One cell becomes an entire human being. And you're going to tell me this makes sense,
Right.
And it's thinking and it has its own agency and it is doing and it has a will and its consciousness. And you didn't explain anything. You're describing all sorts of things. You're not explaining. So how it applies over here. So the Rebbe said something and he really believes it. And look, he's smarter than me. I can't argue with that. He's smarter than me. So I don't understand. That means he's wrong because I don't understand means he's wrong. I'll figure it out. So I remember, there were questions I had.
How do you know he's smart? How do you know?
Questions I had for 40 years. 40 years. And then after 40 years or more, I was saying 40 years, I found the answer to it. Or things that I thought were right. This is what's true. And then 50 years later, you find out I was totally wrong.
Huh.
You believed it for 50 years, thought this is the way it is, and you find that somebody points out to you, I got it wrong. I was so certain. I said, we change our minds all the time.
Right.
So why can't I be wrong? Is there something terrible about that?
No.
I understood it wrong,
Yeah, Rabbi Tzvi Freeman, I know you just said we shouldn't use his first name, but what can I do?
No, your first name is also, you said Rabbi,
Rabbi Tzvi Freeman,
Yeah.
Special Jew.
Yeah.
So he used to chazer over the story very, very often with a line from the chossid Rabbi Hummler, who said about the Alter Rebbe, he's simply kluger for me. He's just smart. He's smarter than me. Like, that's enough of a reason. And like, his point was always like, sometimes we jump to like the spiritual halikite and like this and the miracles. It's like, you don't even need that. Like but to me the Achilles heel of that argument is that can itself be mimicked, where like every single bacher, without even thinking about it, just says, "Oh, of course they're smarter than me." And it's like, I think you have to kind of test that also, right? Because if you're just accepting they're smarter than you, yeah, I mean, chances are he is, right? Chances are he is, but I feel like if you just accept that without basically proving it to yourself,
that's very hard to do with the Rebbe. Mm-hmm. Personally, the first time I saw it was the Merka Shluchim came to my hometown, and they've got this book, and there's pictures of the Rebbe, and I just saw a picture of the Rebbe, and that was it for me.
This is before you came to Lubavitch.
Yeah. And I remember my father says to me, you're an anarchist. You're a radical. You don't accept anybody. You laugh at everybody. Well, how come all of a sudden you're I said, he's different. He's different.
How old are you?
I guess it was 18.
Okay, so you're already pretty formed in your anarchist thinking.
Yeah, from 15 years old already. So, but this is different. It's different. So, but then, Baruch Hashem again. So they had people in our town who just cool me off, don't become a fanatic, don't become this, Orthodox Jews.
Where did you grow up?
Vancouver, British Columbia. And so by the time I came to 770, I was cooled off. But still, you can't help but fall in love with the Rebbe. It's very hard not to.
But you don't think, especially today when you're not having, you don't think that people really need to ask themselves. I don't know. Maybe some people listening to this like, oh, you say Afton's off his mind. Of course, the Rebbe's smarter than. I just feel that of course, even if it's true, it kind of undercuts your entire argument. Like, we cannot question everything besides this one thing. We cannot question God and everything about faith and everything about the purpose of the world and everything. But the one thing that we cannot question is the Rebbe's brilliance.
Okay, you have a chazaka, muchach.
But you wouldn't say that about God, would you?
It's a different type of relationship. The relationship a Jew has with God, or a Jew has with a tzaddik. Like a friend of mine was a philosopher, professor of philosophy, and he said, when a Jew questions, it's like somebody who's been married for 80 years to the same woman, and now questioning, why did I ever marry this lady? It's a different kind of question at this point. You're married. The grandchildren are there. You're married.
You don't think
you're in. When a Jew questions Torah, when a Jew questions God, it's like the biggest Jewish atheist has really more emunah, more connection than the goy who's a mamin. Because he's married, he's in this. He can't get, about the story that his family moved into into an upscale neighborhood, send her kids to a good private school, happens to be Roman Catholic, but it's the best school academically. Gets to December, the kid's coming home and he's singing all these Christmas carols, right? And the father can't take it. Finally says to the kid, listen, kid, stop singing those carols. You have to know, we're Jews. There's only one God and we don't believe in him.
It reminds me of a great story in Hong Kong that my father would tell us. That there was this kid that came from Israel. We had a lot of Israelis that moved to Hong Kong, and the kid's bris name in Eretz Yisrael, they give a traditional name was Moshe, but his parents gave a modern Hebrew
Morris,
name, Moran.
Moran. Okay.
He comes to Hong Kong.
Yeah.
And the teacher introduces him to a bunch of Western English-speaking kids. Hey, students, we have a new student. His name is Moron. And the kids are moron. You can imagine. No. My name is Moshe over here. Yes, no, but
that's okay. Take it seriously. What's the connection? But
you don't feel that a Lubavitcher needs to ask about that connection too?
Okay, so look, I'm learning the Rebbe's Maimarim. The first time I learned with Raphael Minkovitz, came to Vancouver, and he learned with me Rebbe's Sichos. And I remember looking up at him and saying, I thought you guys are not allowed to ask questions like these.
Right.
And it just swept me away. The seichel of the whole thing was so beautiful. It just swept me away. The Maimarim I've been learning for years and years, going over the same Maimarim over and over again. I can't approach this kind of seichel. I see this is real seichel. This is like, I read, I got my library here, lots of academic works and everything. There's no seichel like this. Is the real seichel. My father-in-law, all of a sudden.
But one second, but you're coming from a place where you chose this.
Yeah.
So there was a choice made.
Yeah.
If you were born into
no,
it.
Actually not. No. At first, initially it wasn't a choice. Initially, I just felt swept in. I had to, at a certain point, like I said, step back and say,
okay.
Why?
Okay, so that's what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about. I feel like just drawing on what you've been talking about here, is that the anti-mimicry screed, which resonates with me deeply, it feels like it has to extend all the way. And it feels like that sometimes people will be like, okay, we question everything, but the one thing you can't question is that the Rebbe has all the answers.
I wouldn't even put it that way. I don't see it as the Rebbe has all the answers. And in general, I don't think you can look at it that way. You have to find the answers that work for you.
Uh-huh.
Even if you're going to read, here's the question, here's the answer, maybe it's not your answer. It's not going to work for you. I think Manis Friedman, he had this idea that he's going to write a book. They'll get together different meshpiyim, they're going to make a book. Here's the questions, here's the answers. It's not going to work.
Right.
As I remember, the Rebbe nixed the idea.
Oh, he had this idea back in the day.
Yeah. It doesn't work.
Right.
The answer is only a good answer when you found that answer.
Right.
So here's the place to dig. Here's your Chassidus. Here's firm pegs in the ground for you to work with. Because you're going to start with some assumptions, and you won't even know what your assumptions are.
Right.
And that's our biggest stumbling block when trying to think is we don't realize what assumptions we're making. So here are some good foundations within Tanya, within the Rebbe's Sichos, some good foundations to start with. Yeah, a lot of them you have to question also and see, but you've got some ground to start on over here for your thinking. You can't think out of thin air. You won't think out of thin air.
So it's a foundation. Eretz Chayfetz, I think Chassidus talks about, right? That like the reason why only a Yid can do a mitzvah is because they are fertile soil for the mitzvah.
And so here the
same
idea
thing
is you're infertile soil for thinking.
Right.
For thinking. I see it with a lot of ideas. You read a book, he's a philosopher, a thinker, a psychologist, whatever, and he's coming to these conclusions. You say, But what are his assumptions? He himself doesn't realize that he's making these assumptions.
Right.
And he just considers this is scientific. Why is it scientific? It's an assumption. There's no empirical evidence for it.
Right.
This happens over and over again. We fool ourselves so easily with this. So, but we're going to have assumptions.
The Fidik Rebbe, I was just learning a mimer. He was talking about the difference. It was like, to me, it struck me, wow, this is a really provocative statement, but it's exactly what you're saying. He says the difference between the seichel of Torah and the seichel of everything else is that the seichel of Torah is seichel eki and seichel atzmi. It starts from itself, whereas everything else, seichel anikna. It's based on something else, and you, like you're saying, it's based on something that you can't even account for.
Yeah. Seichel and nikna is also comes in animals. Seichel is nikna, which is probably the same as mimicry.
Oh, that's interesting. It's a mimicry thing.
Nikna, yeah. So can you question? Can you say, well, maybe there was a mistake over here. Maybe he got it wrong. Maybe Chazal made a mistake. You know, the Rebbe's approach, the Rebbe's father's approach is that if this is what Klal Yisrael have accepted, so it's Torah.
Right.
This is what we're working with. What is truth? I mean, how do you define what's true and what's not true to begin with? I'm getting like beyond my pay grade. What is truth, you know?
No, you write quite a bit about this, frankly. It seems like this is precisely your pay grade. I mean, I hope they pay you for your writing.
Yeah. What is truth? Truth is what works.
Right.
For me.
There's something profound about that, right? Where, like, if it's not true, it's going to collapse at some point, right?
Yeah.
It's going to fail.
Yeah.
Right? Like they say about the Soviet Union. Like, eventually the buildings just started tumbling down. Like, the lies literally and physically collapsed.
Yeah, Emes Eretz Titzmach.
Right.
It means the real test ground for truth is in real life. Is it working? But if it doesn't have if nobody else ever came up with such an idea, you're going to have to really question. There's no fertile ground for this idea, and you're going to try it out and sail it. You know, I don't know. I don't think that's a way to go. You want to find something that has smuchis to it before you go and experiment.
So it seems like you're saying that there is a point of certainty. There's a point that shouldn't that at some point to answer a question, you need to have a sense that this answer comes from God. That's what Torah is ultimately, isn't it? Like if you're going to distrust the Torah, eventually you're going to have doubts all the way. You're going to have no starting point.
No, you'll have no starting point.
You're shoveling in the air.
But you can ask if this understanding that's been presented to me, have I understood this understanding? Or did the people who taught it to me, did they understand? I have to go deeper and understand it deeper. And sometimes you come up to the opposite of what everybody thought it was.
Maybe that's the idea that all the neshamas are by Matan Torah. That ultimately there has to be a starting point that it's not mimicry and it's from me. So to wrap it up, unless you wanted to finish a thought here.
I think it would be silly to go about making conclusions, saying, but I'm going to ignore what everybody thought before me. It's just silly.
Yes.
And when you're talking about, here's an Am Nitzchi, it's an amazing thing that we're Jews and we're here today. This works. The fact that Jews are here today shows, hey, we're on to something, you know. So if you're on the spaceship and it's been traveling for 3,500 years and you're way out down in space and they say, you know what, I think the engine's built all wrong. You're going to have a lot of very, very good proof before you can start changing that because it got you this far.
Yes.
So, and it did, and it's not just we're here, we've changed the world. Because the good values in the world today come from the Jews. We really had a huge impact on the world in a very good way, a positive way. So there must be something good over here. I'm not going to go down into the belly of the ship and start
Tinkering.
mixing around with. But what I can do is try to figure out, why does it work?
Right.
What's going on over here? That's and how can we get it to work even better?
Yeah, it's probably not a good idea to drill holes at the bottom of the ship just for the sake of
Trying that out.
Yeah, like experimentation. Yeah.
In the 70s, we were experimenting with education. Everybody wanted to try experiments.
Right.
And they did radical things with education. Let's say everything was done wrong until now. We're going to do it all upside down. And it was stupid. It was totally messed up.
Yeah.
Totally messed up. And a lot of things today, all of a sudden, a man and a woman is the same thing. What? Yeah, that's progress. So that's not progress. That's just the way the machines want us to be. The machines like us. It's too much complication if there's two different genders over here. Let's make them one gender. Everything will be half as complicated. You know, that's not called progress. We think it's progress.
It's drilling holes in the bottom of the ship.
Yeah.
So let's wrap it up. We started off with the question of bittul, and you said it's self-transcendence. I don't think I gave you a chance to explain that.
No, I didn't explain a thing about that. No.
Do you want to explain it?
I wrote about it. There's an article on what is bittul, so you can just read that.
Okay. But in the context of this conversation, you talked about how the goal is to break down assumptions, to basically completely annihilate mimicry, right? Or to challenge,
put it in place at least.
Put a place or challenge, confront mimicry. Yeah. Doesn't that have something to do with your notion of self-transcendence?
I have to think about that. Yeah, I have to think about that. Does it take bittul to have real seichel? Well, the reason follow Beis Hillel and not Beis Shammai because the bittul. So real seichel, real chachma is bittul. So you have to transcend yourself, and real seichel is the transcendence of self. And learning means to transcend yourself. Learning means I didn't know this before. Everything that I had assumed was without this knowledge, and now I change everything. And that not just proclivity, but capacity for change comes from a place of bittul. So chachma is bittul. So learning is bittul. Intelligence is bittul. And to be human means to have that bittul and grow. Radical change. So it's all one package. That's nice. It's elegant.
Radical change is a good way to wrap this up. Thank you very much for doing this.
Thanks. It's been a lot of fun.
This has been a thrill. Yes.
Thank you.
The music for this podcast comes from the album Repentance Doors by Oren Sor Nadav Bachar and is used with their permission.